Today's spoiler video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Use the link below to pre-order your cards today. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Theros Beyond Death spoilers. So last night was the Game Awards. That gave us a few spoilers along with the mechanics article on the mothership. So honestly, we don't have a ton of high rarity stuff to talk about today. We have one new rare that I'm actually really excited for. We have one semi-new rare. It was one of the leaked cards from a while ago, but we're going to mention it briefly, and then a bunch of lower rarity stuff that kind of shows off what Theros is about. So that's the plan for today, and we're going to jump right into it. Start talking about some sweet new Theros cards. Before we do, a super quick reminder. If you haven't already, it would be so sweet of you if you could take a second, click that subscribe button down at the bottom of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk some Theros Beyond Death, starting with the card I'm most excited about from today's daily spoilers, which is Setessan Champion. This is one of, maybe the best Enchantress we've seen in a long time. 3 mana, 1/3. It has the mechanic Constellation, which, if you're not familiar with this mechanic, it was a mechanic from original Theros. Basically, whenever an enchantment comes into play, you get to do something. In this case, whenever an enchantment comes into play, you get to put a counter on Setessan Champion, and you get to draw a card. So this makes Setessan Champion kind of a hybrid of old Enchantresses that we've had, a Gorthian Enchantress, Vidurian Enchantress, and then also kind of like Yavimaya Enchantress, which isn't a real Enchantress. It's a creature that gets big based on the number of enchantments in play. The thing I love about Setessan Champion is it fixes one of the biggest issues with old Enchantress creatures. If you look back at old Enchantress creatures, like Vidurian Enchantress or Gorthian Enchantress, these are creatures that are very strong as engine pieces. You play them, you play a bunch of enchantments, you get to draw a bunch of cards, so they're very strong card draw engines. On the other hand, they're not very good creatures. They're often 0 power, sometimes like 2 2s for 3. They're not big threats on their own. Setessan Champion happens to be not only a on-curve Enchantress, like it's a 3-drop that draws a card whenever enchantment comes into play. It's the same as Vidurian Enchantress, except it also turns into the biggest threat on the battlefield if it sticks around, because you cast a few enchantments, and all of a sudden this is going to be a 5-power creature, a 6-power creature. It's going to grow into the biggest thing on the battlefield. So I feel like that is what makes Setessan Champion very attractive for an Enchantress, basically in all formats. So as far as Standard is concerned, right now, we're kind of in a weird place as far as enchantments. There are some floating around, removal stuff like Tribunal, Ley Lines, Divine Visitation, and we do have a theme of enchantments from some older sets. We got Starfield of Mystic, which works well in an Enchantress deck. Back in M20, we got a bunch of stuff in Throne of Eldraine that kind of walked the line between artifacts and enchantments. At the time, you're wondering, like, why do they say artifacts and enchantments? Because in Throne of Eldraine, the focus was more on artifacts. Well, we know the enchantment reason, which is now we're heading to Theros. Theros cares about enchantments, so stuff like All That Glitters. We've been playing it in like artifact aggro affinity style decks. It's just as devastating in a enchantment style deck, where you're going to grow your creature into a huge threat, and you're going to like draw a card with Setessan Champion, Mirror Maid, etc, etc, etc. Plus, I mean, Theros itself, it's like enchantment heaven, so I expect that we will get a ton more support for Setessan Champion as we get to see the rest of Theros. Also, worth mentioning, there is something about Setessan Champion that makes it a little different than most Enchantresses. Normally, Enchantresses, through the history of Magic, are worded that you draw a card when you cast an enchantment. Setessan Champion, thanks to Constellation, draws a card whenever an enchantment comes into play. This allows for some sweet combos that are not available with most other Enchantresses. You can Starfield of Nyx back an enchantment and draw a card. In Standard, you got Dance of the Manse brought back. You can reanimate a bunch of enchantments all at once and draw a ton of cards and kind of like combo off. So that's an important thing to realize. Even in older formats like Rancor, sacking the creature with Rancor, get back Rancor, cast Rancor for 1 mana, draw another card, grow your Setessan Champion. There's tons of shenanigans because Setessan Champion is worded very differently than most Enchantresses. So I think this is a card that actually has a chance to see play in Standard for sure, and I think this is good enough that we might see an older format Enchantress decks as well. Like in Pioneer, we have Eidolon of Blossoms from our first visit to Theros, and Setessan Champion happens to be right on curve, turn 3 or even turn 2 with a mana dork. You play Setessan Champion, follow it up with Eidolon, grow your Setessan Champion, draw 2 cards, one from Eidolon, one from Setessan Champion, and then you're just off to the races where every enchantment is going to be this huge burst of card advantage. In Modern, we have like prison-y stuff, Ghostly Prisons, Fear of Safeties. Setessan Champion could certainly work there as well, and even going all the way back to Legacy, where you get like Serra Sanctum, this might be a fill-in Enchantress piece, Enchantress. Although it is worth mentioning, it's not an enchantment itself, which maybe works against it, and a lot of the Enchantresses that see play in Legacy Enchantress are either enchantments, or they have shrouds, so they can't die, so we'll see how that works, but I'm very confident that this will see play in Standard. Think it's likely it could see play in Pioneer, and probably Modern as well, and Legacy, definitely a possibility too, although I'm not a Legacy Enchantress expert, so I think Setessan Champion is very pushed. It might not look like much, but the combination of being is good as past Enchantresses, and arguably better because it triggers when enchantment comes into play, rather than when you cast it, plus being this massive creature that's going to grow into the biggest threat on the table and can kind of win by itself, like that Rancor combo we were talking about, where you're like, cast Rancor, draw a card, go Setessan Champion, sack a random creature that has the Rancor on it, cast it again for 1 mana, do it again, cast it again for 1 mana, you're going to quickly grow Setessan Champion into like a 10 power trampling creature and just win the game in a couple of attacks. Combine that together, I'm going to say Setessan Champion is in the top 3 of Enchantresses ever printed. Hard to weigh it against like Argothian Enchantress, which has Shroud and is like unkillable essentially, and you just draw a ton of cards. But the fact that this becomes such a massive threat and is so good at drawing cards, I think this card's legit. I think this is a very powerful card that we are going to see a lot of in multiple formats. Next on our list, we got a saga. This is the leaked rare that we talked a little bit about before, but it's been confirmed, the Akroan War. So this is a kind of a unique, sort of aggressive, mixed with controlling. I don't even know. It's a weird card. So basically, comes into play, you gain control of target creature for as long as it remains on the battlefield. On your next turn, your opponent's creatures have to attack you if able. Then, on the last lore counter, each tapped creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. So what you basically have is, hopefully a 2-for-1. You get to steal your opponent's creature, and then with your opponent's creature, you'll untap your next turn. Your opponent's got to attack into that creature. So in theory, if things line up right, you can kill the creature that you stole from your opponent, and you can kill the creature that attacked into it, and then you get like a solar blaze for tap creatures at the end. It'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. It reminds me a little bit of a weird take on like Grab the Reins, Active Aggression. It's slower, but you should get a 2-for-1 out of this at a minimum, and then because all your opponent's creatures are forced to attack, depending on their power, you might actually get a Wrath out of the deal on just your opponent's side as well. So I think this card has potential to be very powerful, although it is a little bit slow, and it's unique in a way that makes it hard to break down. So I'm not exactly sure where it's going to fall on the competitive scale, but definitely a super unique saga, and sagas are awesome, and I'm glad the sagas are back. So just that, I guess, is the big takeaway. More sagas coming in Theros. Whether the Akroan War itself is a constructed staple, that remains to be seen, although worst case, this is limited bomb, I think. The 2-for-1 itself in limited, even ignoring the third lore counter of just stealing a creature and then double trading the creature you steal with the attacking creature, just that is a huge swing in limited, and I expect will make the Akroan War a high pick in draft and very good in sealed. Maybe it shows up in constructed too. We also got some lower rarity stuff, kind of showing off mechanics. So, oh my god, Kolthis's don't yell at me. Design. Devotion is back. This is like Devotion Overrun, essentially. Doesn't give creatures trample, but it's going to make them huge in a green deck. Mostly for limited, 6 mana. Maybe it could be like a 1 of it constructed, but you can do powerful things for 6 mana and constructed. And then Daxos returns. Daxos, Blessed by the Sun, which has a lot going on. Shows off Devotion, a 2 mana, 2-star, with its toughness equal to your devotion to white. So by itself, it's a 2 mana 2/2. But if you have a bunch of other white creatures, it's going to be a 2 mana whatever, 2/10 or something ridiculous. It is a enchantment creature, so it triggers all of our enchantment matter stuff. We can draw a card with our Enchantress we were talking about. It's a demigod, which is a creature type we haven't seen before, and then it gives you some nice life gain synergies. Basically a super soul sister. When a creature you control comes into play or dies, you gain a life. So I think the most obvious home for this, some sort of life gain style deck. We got a Johnny's Pridemate still. We got a Johnny's Strength of the Pride still. It's a popular kind of budget casual deck, I would say. It has not really broken in the top tier of standards. I don't know if Daxos is going to change that. Also, Daxos could be a good White Devotion sideboard card, depending on what Devotion looks like in the standard format, where we've seen cards like Nyx Fleece Ram, with these high toughness 2-drops that tend to slowly gain life. See play all the way back to Modern in some cases as your like hoser against aggro. Exos should be able to basically do that. It's going to be a high toughness 2-drop. It's going to incidentally gain you life even faster than Nyx Fleece Ram. So I think that in a White Devotion style deck, worst case, this is a good sideboard option to fight against aggro. Best case, maybe some sort of Soul Sister style life gain deck actually takes off in Standard. We also got Underworld Rage out. We already saw the escape mechanic, which was highlighted on Elspeth that we talked about a couple of days ago, but I think this mechanic is just very strong. Even Underworld Rage out, which is not actually a super push creature. It's a 2-mana 3/1, which, okay, whatever. Has to attack each turn, kind of a drawback, but when it comes back from the graveyard, for 4 mana exiling 3 cards, you put a counter on it as a 4/2. Just that seems close to playable for me. You get a on-curve attacker that turns into an on-curve attacker, so it's essentially 2 creatures for the price of 1. That is a very powerful effect, even with this lowly common that is probably going to be one of the least exciting escape creatures that we see in the entire set. I just think the mechanic itself is very, very strong, to the point where maybe even Underworld Ragehounds can show up in some sort of like mono-red aggro deck. Otherwise, we got to see a bunch of arena cards, which highlight one of the sweet themes of Theros Beyond Death, which is enchantments that kind of work like spells. So because Theros is all about enchantments, one of the things Wizards has done to kind of reinforce the enchantment theme is take a card like Mire's Grasp, which looks like it would be a black instant or sorcery, and turn it onto an enchantment. It's a 2-mana enchantment, gives the creature -3/-3. That's a really decent removal spell. Like, if that was a instant or a sorcery, I would expect it to see play in Standard. Being an enchantment means it is always sorcery speed. On the other hand, being an enchantment can be an upside, especially in Theros, when we've been talking about all these Enchantress effects, things that care about enchantments running around. Inevitable End kind of looks like an edict that's out of aura. You enchant a creature, beginning your next upkeep, that creature gets sacrificed, so kind of like a Diabolic Edict, but in enchantment form. Eidolon of Philosophy, another enchantment creature, another way to up the enchantment count. These cards, I think, are like medium playable. I think Mire's Grasp will be played, potentially. -3/-3 for 2 mana. That kills most things in the early game, and because it's an enchantment, in the late game you can use it to shrink down a bigger creature. So that one I think is probably going to be constructed playable. Inevitable End, Eidolon of Philosophy, not as excited about those, but you never know. Otherwise, Memory Drain, really expensive counter. Not going to see play, I don't think. Scrying 2 is nice, but 4 mana is just too much for a counter, unless it is really spectacular to see play in Standard. Otherwise, Indomitable Will and Revoke Existence give us a couple of sweet reprints. Revoke Existence, a great way to fight against artifacts and enchantments. Exiling can be key there, especially with like recursive enchantments. Indomitable Will, originally from Champions of Kamigawa, I think. Just kind of a pump spell. Maybe if there's some sort of Boggles list or Heroic list it could see play. Having Flash allows for some blowouts during combat, but mostly just more sweet Nykthos reprints. And that has been our daily Theros Beyond Death spoilers for today. So let me know what you think of all these cards. What do you think of our new Enchantress? How good is that card? Is it as good as I'm giving it credit for? Is it one of the best Enchantresses we've ever seen? What about our new Saga? What is that one going to do? Is it a limited card? Can it see playing constructed? All the lower rarity stuff, our devotion stuff, demigods. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.